Jai Sai Ram, we're here with Andrew DeMille, our brother from Tampa, who has actually been president of the Tampa Sai Center. He has a deep perspective on life and many wisdoms to share with us. And we're looking forward to getting some of your stories, some of the insights, some of the experiences, anything that's impacted you and your spiritual journey with Sathya Sai Baba. Jai Sai Ram, brother.
All right, thank you, Aaron. I joined the Orlando Sai Center in about 2001, and it was interesting because a yoga teacher that I had from college had mentioned to me one day. I think it was asking her if she had found any, enlightened teachers, and she said, one of my friends told me about somebody in India who could produce gold, and I was just thinking to myself, I'm not interested in that at all. I need some answers, Like, what are we doing here? What's the point of all this? Because I had discovered, not a lot of people that I saw had any answers that I wanted to follow. So, and then another friend of mine that I worked with had a book out one day, a compendium of Sai Baba's teachings. So I found most Sai Baba devotees to be very open when they're talking amongst devotees, but when they're around other people, they're usually pretty closed up about, it's not a proselytizing group, right? So we don't typically preach. So I finally beat it out of him to get me to tell me where the center was. And I went, and as soon as I saw the picture, I was just like, oh, this is my teacher. And I have no idea why or how. When I look back on it, I think I have no idea where that came from. But that's how it went. So, over the years I've had several experiences. He really taught me to value the inner experience. What Swami says is the interview instead of the interview.
Elaborating a little further, perhaps there's an inner experience that you would be willing to share.
I used to meditate for a couple hours in the morning, and now I do a little bit less than that. But probably most of the time I was just sitting there thinking, oh, I'm meditating 2 hours. But in those 2 hours, I definitely would fall into blissful experiences. And so sometimes when I wasn't meditating during the day, I would fall into a blissful experience. And on one particular day, I was preparing my semester because I'm a college professor, so I was preparing the syllabi and the course calendar, things like that. And I just thought to myself, this is such a great job. I love my job. Like, I enjoy everything about this. I'm excited about teaching. And I just felt super content. And I looked up in the corner of my office and I saw a light. It was like a little light about this big. I don't know what it was. And I saw the light come towards me and hit me in the head. And for 2 hours, 3 hours, I was just in this blissful state where, I don't want to say I left my body or anything, but I left what I typically experience of like being so attached to all of my senses. And I remember a couple hours later I had to go to a meeting, and so I knew I had to go get some lunch, so I walked to get some lunch, and it was like I was on a different place, seeing everything from a different perspective. And I tried to eat food, I couldn't eat food, my body didn't want any food, and it was just a completely different experience, and yet I was living in this same, environment. And in fact, that's the goal. To have the constant integrated awareness of that spiritual bliss that you're developing when you do pujas or worship sessions, when you do spiritual singing or bhajans, when you're doing meditation. The point is not to compartmentalize it, but feel that bliss all the time. I think a lot of people read teachings like, oh, all you have to do is do this mantra 3 times a day, once in the morning, once at noon, and once at night. And that's all you have to do to be spiritual. It's like, that's what when a teacher's telling you that, they mean like, rather than do absolutely nothing, do at least that, and you'll get your mind started for the day. But at that point, I was doing typically a longer meditation. I was waking up earlier and doing a longer meditation. And like I said, probably most of that time I was just sitting there, but I was having deeper experiences at that point. And I've also found that in spiritual practices, there's sometimes when you're going to go deeper and other times where you're going to pull away a little bit because you feel like you're not making progress. But most important thing is to keep going forward. There's this one teacher in India, Lahiri Mahasaya, who would say like, working, and one day it's done. So, of course, even spiritual teachers will tell you the spiritual path never ends, but you do reach certain levels, like I said, where you think like, oh, I've been able to control my temper for the past 6 months, and it's not as hard as it used to be. Or I would say 6 days a week, I'm having a really blissful experience when I meditate, whereas before it used to be 1 day every 6 weeks. So that's something I would definitely encourage people to do, is just have a little practice, whatever it is that makes you feel an inner peace, and keep that up, because there's very real results that you can experience from that. I play guitar at the Sai Center, and the musicians are all up front and on the floor. One of the things I like to do when I at the Sai Centers when I sing bhajans is picture Sai Baba in his chair, but I was so close that I couldn't see the chair or the picture or anything. All I saw was the legs, the base of the chair was at my head, so I was like looking through basically the floor of the altar. And so I would talk to myself as if I were talking to Sai Baba in my head, and I said, Swami, where should I look? And just at that moment, a picture of his feet went like that and moved just ever so slightly. I don't even think anybody there saw it, but it was enough for me to be like, if anybody tells you that they don't want them, they're not telling the truth, because their experience is just like everybody else. Why would you not want that? Is it as valuable as an inner blissful experiences? No, of course not. Those outer experiences are, like I said, they're very nice too.
Definitely they're not as important. I would agree with you 100% there. However, I would think that for some people's development, they can actually be just as important, because it helps them start to believe spirituality isn't just in their head, and that it crosses over into reality a little more. And it's easy to argue, I guess, that you can affect your emotional state by spiritual practices, but when it manifests in the physical world, I think that also brings it to a level of reality for people too.
That's a good point. Yeah. Remember one time I was sitting there, and in our center, when different people would sing or talk, we would always put 3 flowers on top of Sai Baba's picture, and flowers on the chair, and often flowers would fall when a certain devotee was singing a certain song, let's say a certain line like "I surrender to you," and flowers would fall or something. And so it had never happened to me, and I was just like, this is such a silly thing to ask for. Sai Baba's often said, don't ask me for things, I'll give you things, I know what you need. But I just had the thought, I don't want to say I don't want it. So I was talking to Sai Baba in my head again, saying like, if you do this for me, here are my stipulations. As if we can ask those things. Number one, it needs to be obvious. It can't just be like, oh, I think that might have happened, I don't know. And it needs to be noticeably to me. It can't just be like, oh, well, while you were singing your song, we all saw it fall, right? So, but it's a silly thought. I don't even need it. It's fine. But if you want to do it, I want it like that. So as I was singing, I look up and a flower turned. It was laying flat. The flower had been cut. And the bulb turned and faced me. And I said in my head, no, Sai Baba, that's not enough. It could have been anybody, I don't know, that's not enough. And right when I said that, it fell down, hit a step, hit another step, and then fell down at my feet. So, I guess I got my selfish request.